Hello, how are you, and welcome to a new video. Today I am here to talk about 22 books that I want to read in 2022. So if you haven't watched my previous video where I make resolutions, where I said that I want to read more from my shelves, this is basically going to be talking about the 22 books that are on my shelves that I definitely want to read this year. If you haven't checked out my previous video though, where I spoke about 10 books that from 2021 that I want to read, and like you should check that out because I thought that was a pretty fun video. I also spoke about some TV series and just general content that I haven't watched from 2021, so and a lot of y'all have been giving me great recommendations in the comments, so please continue that. I loved it. So that's basically it. I'm going to talk to you about 22 books from my shelves right now that I definitely want to read in this year, and they are of various categories. They are classics, there is non-fiction, there is literary stuff, there is horror. Can you believe it? We're going to the gamut of things, so let's just begin. And I thought that we would begin with classics because in 2020 I started this thing where I would read more classics, and I thought I would read like 30 classics before I turned 30. I managed to do like 23 or 24, I think, which is pretty damn good. I will link you to that playlist. I read like quite a few of them, but there were some books that I did not get to, so these are some. The first one, which is quite a monumental task, is A Crime and Punishment by Fyodor Dostoevsky. I have read Tolstoy, but I feel like I want to read a Dostoevsky clearly just to say that I've read a Dostoevsky, but also that I've heard it's really, really good. I've heard that it's basically about this guy who wants to murder this pawnbroker, and then he does, and then something happens. I don't really know. I don't want to know. It's this really huge, ginormous book, but I've heard it's really, really good. Whoever do end up reading it, they're like, oh my god, it's so good, Dostoevsky. So I want to be one of those people who go like, oh my god, Dostoevsky. Okay, that's basically the plan. Another classic that I want to read, let me just look it up here, yes, is Shadow of the Wind. This is another classic that is translated from Spanish, if I'm not mistaken, by Carlos Ruiz Zafron, and it's basically about this guy who finds this book, and he goes and he really loves it, but he realizes that there's some weird thing going on where this one author, all of his books are being removed from history, and there's this whole thing going on. I don't really know too much about it. I don't want to know too much about it. I've been trying to stay away from any information about it, but I've heard it's absolutely amazing, and it's right here. It's that red thing over there if you see it. But yes, that's a book that I really want to read. Another one is Master and Margarita by Mikhail Bulgakov, and this is a book that is Daniel Radcliffe's favorite book, so you have it there, but also it just sounds so weird. It was part of that 30s, before 30. That was a book that I really wanted to get to, but I didn't, because as you know, if I think this book is going to be something that I love, I just don't read it for some reason. But yeah, this one is basically Satan comes to Russia with a troupe of his, which has a talking cat and a lady who loves vodka, and just creates havoc in Russia, and it's a thing about Stalin and all of that. My friend Jyotsna just read this book and she loved it too, so I'm glad, because I love weird books, and Jyotsna I don't think really does. So if she loved it, I'm sure I will absolutely love it. So that's amazing. And then the last of the classics is The Bloody Chamber and Other Stories by Angela Carter. This is a book that I've really been wanting to read ever since I heard of it. Actually, I think I heard of it in Dipanjana Pal and podcast that happened. I don't know if you guys know Books on Toast. It's a very lovely books channel, and I will link you to that episode. I think it's one of the best episodes ever, but I think she spoke about it very briefly there, and I absolutely loved it. The idea of it, I bought it immediately, but it's essentially Angela Carter takes a bunch of folk tales and fairy tales and puts her own bloody spin on it, and I just think that it's going to be really cool because it's feminist and amazing, and I don't know, I just think that it sounds really interesting and really cool, so I want to read it. So there's that. Next, let's move on to non-fiction. So in non-fiction, I have 3 books that I want to read. The first one is The Man Who Loved Books Too Much, and this is basically a story of a man who went around stealing like first editions of books and books that were really, really expensive, and he was just like this guy who would steal books, and like he made a living out of it, and that like we basically chart his life and what he did and all of that sort of stuff. So it's like a heist story, but you're stealing books, and this happened in real life. Like, it just sounds wild to me. I really want to read it. Ever since I heard that it existed, I was just like, oh man, that needs to happen. Another one is Secondhand Time by Svetlana Alexievich, and this is a book that won the Nobel Prize. It's like, well, I'm not too sure exactly what it is, but I think it's something to do with like Chernobyl, I think. I may be very wrong about this, but like I've heard that it's a really, really amazing, and it's like charted out all these people's lives, and it's really good. So, and I have it, so I want to read it. And then the last of the non-fiction is The Republic of Caste by Anand Teltumbe. This is a book that talks about Dalit history from like the beginning of like the constitution to like where it is now, and all of that sort of took place. Like gives us more context and history about the Dalit movement and all of that sort of stuff. And I really want to read this book, and this is part of actually my book club. So if you don't know, I have a book club called Consciousness Raising Bookclub, and we are going to be reading this through like the mid-Feb to the end of, what is the month after? March. Yes. We're going to be reading in mid-Feb to March. So do join us if you want to for that. I think it's going to be really fun, and I think it'll be really fruitful for all of us to be reading it together, because like I'm sure there'll be a lot of questions that we'll have. We'll just be like, what does this mean? And then we get to ask this to each other. But cool, let's move on next to, what should we move on to? Literary, perhaps? Alright, so literary, I've actually already read one book in this, which is If Beale Street Could Talk by James Baldwin. I made this list a while ago. I made this like in 2021. So, well, I finished one, so this is great. So If Beale Street Could Talk by James Baldwin, this is basically about this guy and a girl who are pregnant, but then the guy is put in jail for a crime that he did not commit, and it's basically that story, but it is absolutely beautiful, stunning. Spoiler alert, I gave it 5 stars, so just amazing. I'm so glad that I read it and I put it on this list. So, well, I mean, we've already completed one. This is amazing. The next one is Pastoralia by George Saunders. So I read his book, I'm forgetting what it's called, the one with the goats that won the Booker. I liked that one. I thought it was really, really interesting writing. But like from what I've heard of people who have read George Saunders, I have heard that this short story collection called Pastoralia is like some of his best, and I should definitely check that out. So I have the book and I really plan to read it soon. Anuya, who is from Books on Toast, strongly recommends it. So that is that. And the next one is My Year of Rest and Relaxation. This book I know has been calling to me for a longest time, because this is basically like the story of what this lady does in the book is basically what I did. She was like essentially fed up with the world, so she's like, you know what, screw the world for a year. I'm just gonna stay at home and stay in bed, and figure it out. So she has like philosophical thoughts and like all of like what is life, what is world. I mean, I don't know, actually. I could be making this up completely, because as you know, I don't like to know too much about a book before I get into it, because I like for it to be a surprise. But anyway, so that is what I think the book is about. That's what I'm hoping to get from it. Hopefully that's what it is. But I've heard mixed things about this book, but I think personally that I would like really vibe with it. So there's that. Next, let's move on to LGBT, because why not? So in LGBT, one book that I have that I really want to read is an author that like I've never read before, that is Jeanette Winterson, and the book that I have, which is like her most famous one, which is Oranges Are Not the Only Fruit, and this is basically about girl who is like coming of age. She's realized that she's a lesbian, and it's just that sort of story. But I've heard that it's really, really good. A lot of people just sing so many praises about this one, so I really want to read it. And then the other one is another author that I've not read, but I really, really want to read. I have so many books of hers, and that is Sarah Waters. So the book that I want to read is Fingersmith, and this is set in like Victorian England. Again, it's to do with like lesbianism, and there's like people who are stealing, and like I don't know, it's supposed to be this whole like thing. I don't again want to know too much about the story, but I've heard it's absolutely amazing. Historical fiction, Victorian era, queer people, it just sounds absolutely amazing. And I've heard Sarah Smith is just such a brilliant writer, so yeah, I can't wait. Next we have In the Dream House by Carmen Maria Machado. This was a book that as soon as I read it, I heard about it, I really wanted to read it, and I bought it immediately and then just haven't read it. And this is basically her memoir of her relationship with another woman, but it was a really fraught and like abusive relationship, but she tells that story of that relationship, but in this really, really interesting way, like in terms of like a horror movie or in a review or in a like whatever, like she tells it in like these really different manners, and I won't be able to explain to you what that is without me actually reading it. So I will read it and I will tell you. But yeah, I just think that it sounds really interesting. Whoever's read it has also found it like to be really like compelling and well written. So there's that. And then the last of the LGBT is Funny Boy by Shyam Selvadurai, and this is a coming of age of this young boy in Sri Lanka during the Sri Lankan civil war that was taking place between what's it called, the Tamils and the Sinhalese. But it's him realizing that he's gay and like all of that sort of stuff, but it's with this background as well of what's happening in his country. And a lot of people have really loved this book as well. I think it got made into a movie, which I haven't watched. I don't know if I want to either, but like that's another story. But yeah, I've heard so much about this book. I really want to read it. My friend Sai nonstop talks about it, so hi Sai. So yeah, I just really want to read the book and talk about it with him and with y'all if you have read it as well or want to read it. Next, let's go into translated. So with translated, I have 3 books. The first one is The Eighth Life by Nino something, you will see here. And this is a Georgian book that is translated from John? I don't know. Let me just not talk from my ass. But this is a book that is huge, like ginormous, but I've heard so many good things about. Everyone on like Bookstagram has lost their collective minds about this book. I bought it as soon as it released because it sounded so interesting. It's basically like the story of one family but told through 8 generations of women, I think. And it just sounded so lovely, and everyone and their mom was just like, oh my god, this book is amazing. And now that people have actually read it, well, I want to read it too. Like that's that's the whole point. I think it's going to be really, really fun. And the next one is The Time Regulation Institute, and this is one of the best Turkish books ever written in the 20th century. That's how it was sold to me, but it sounded really bizarre. It's about this guy who is part of the Time Regulation Institute, and he's talking to his psychotherapist about like what's happening at work and how he meets these various different sort of people, and like they're very like weird and like I don't know, but it just sounded like right up my alley when like I heard of it. And I don't remember much else right now, but it just sounded so cool, and I wanted to read a book that was translated from like Turkish, and to be like one of the best books that have come out of their country. Sure, why not? So that was that. And then the last is an Indian book, I mean within the translated bit, is an Indian book called Partitions or Kitne Pakistan by Kamleshwar. And this also is just like a really weird, like I don't know, like plot, but essentially it's like people are dead now, and there's this fictitious like I don't know, like law judge thingy, courtroom, yes, there's a fictitious courtroom, and people are called upon to tell their version of history. And this could be like people like Mountbatten, like Hitler, like I don't know, like a weird mix of people, okay? Like a weird mix of people. They keep coming on, telling their version of history, Babur, Aurangzeb, just like from everywhere. And I don't know the reason for this, but I don't want to know because it just sounds bizarre and amazing. This was written about like the partition, and I don't know how it all like kind of combines. But again, as I said, I don't want to know. I just want to get into the book. I think it sounds amazing. I hope that it will be. But yeah, I just think that it'll be absolutely amazing. Next, let's move on to horror. So I have two in horror. I know horror just seems so like out of the blue for me, but one book that I really want to read this year, that I wanted to read last year but I just couldn't get myself to do, was The House of Leaves. This is a book that Books and Lala started like reading this year because of like I don't know, like her what's it called, her book club. They started reading it together, and I tried to read it as well, but I just could not. I couldn't get into it, so I just want to get into it this year because it's supposed to be a really tough read, but ultimately it's like super fulfilling. It's very like out there, out of the blue. Like I don't know, like there are pages that you have to read in the mirror, you have to read upside down. It's just weird. And I guess I wanna read it. I spent a little bit of money on it, so I think that I should read it. So there's that. And then the next one is The Lottery and Other Stories by Shirley Jackson. Shirley Jackson was a person that I discovered in 2020, I think, yes. And I just loved her sort of horror. Her horror is not about like jump scares or anything, but it's about the horror of being human and like how terrible we are as people. I just loved the way that she writes and like the sort of twists and like things that she thinks of. It's absolutely like bizarre and amazing. And I just want to read more of her. So I have this book of hers, which is The Lottery, which is like her main short story, which she's known for, but then a bunch of other stories as well. So yeah, I wanna read that one. Okay, and then we're on the last genre, which is fantasy, which you know, I don't know, I don't really read too much of, but I think I've been like been converted. And the book from the fantasy genre, there are two of them which are from the same series, and that is Six of Crows and Cricket Kingdom. This is like the sequel of sorts of the Shadow and Bone series, which I read this year. I didn't particularly love them, but all my friends love Six of Crows and Crooked Kingdom. So I really want to read this one. I think it's going to be super fun to read it and then discuss it with them as well. So yeah, those are two books from the fantasy thing. And then the last book that I want to read is A Long Way to a Small Angry Planet by Becky Chambers. I read this book this year by Becky Chambers called The Psalm of the Wild Built, which is a short novella by her. And I absolutely fell in love with her writing and the way that she writes characters and people and all that I've heard about like this series of hers, which is the Small Way to an Angry Planet series. I think it's called the Wayfarer series, I think. Is that like her characters are amazing and all of that, and I saw that in that novella that I read, which is so yeah, okay, the battery is blinking at me now. So that's it. That's all the books that I want to read in 2022 from my shelves. I will obviously be reading more, but these are ones for sure. Keep me accountable. Let me know other books that you want to read, and I'm gonna go before my battery dies on me. So bye, see you in my next video.